its foes, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. My God will never fail. Oh, my God will never fail. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Oh, hey. There's power in the mighty name of Jesus. Every war he wages, he will win. Oh, I'm not backing down from any giant. 'Cause I know how this story ends. Yes, I know how this story ends. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Gonna worship my way through this battle. Gonna worship my way through. Hey. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Come on. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Oh, I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory.
Hello, good evening, and apa khabar Malaysia, and wherever you're tuning in from, welcome to the Family Heart Talk, brought to you by FGAKL and Family Life. My name is Sukdev and I will be your host this evening. So, in episode 2 today, we'll be bringing you the topic titled Silent Screams and Hidden Cries, Handling Violence and Aggression in the Home. The intention of this topic is to bring awareness on the devastating effects of abuse and violence in families and in homes. These screams and cries that are unheard of could be coming from the most unsuspecting individuals who could be our very own friends, relatives, or even family members. Now, with the current pandemic and recent lockdown that has occurred throughout the world, reports suggest that these occurrences and cases, indeed, of cases of abuse and violence have indeed increased. And we cannot allow such screams be unheard to go on. But how? How do we do this? And that is why we need to understand what abuse, violation of rights of an individuals are. And I'm sure there are many questions that arise from each one of you whenever such topics or issues are being discussed or presented. And so this very evening, we would like to address some of them. So, to help us understand as much as possible and answer them, with me this evening, I have three distinguished panelists. Let's welcome them. So, we have with us this evening Dr. James Nayagam, Dr.
Good
Yo
evening.
Pei Lee, and Philomena Paulian. So, hi, good evening, everyone,
Good
and panelists.
evening.
Thank you for
Hi.
joining us. So, allow me first to the audience to give some background of our panelists this evening. So, firstly, Dr. James Nayagam. Well, he is currently the chairman of Suryana Welfare Society, Sukha Society, and a founding member of Shelter Homes. Now, these are NGOs focusing on welfare of children, and he has also served 2 terms as a commissioner of Suhakam, that is the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. And together with him, Dr. Yo Pei Lee, who is a licensed counselor with Malaysian Board of Counsellors since 2003. She specializes with trauma work, couple and family counseling, as well as career guidance. She's currently the Dean of Counseling Studies at AOIC, or formerly known as Alpha Omega International College, and also lectures at Monash University, Malaysia. And our third panelist, she's a lawyer by profession, Philomena. Now she is, what I would say, it's a kecil-kecil cili padi, you know. So she has handled cases and a human rights activist, and she has handled cases related to human trafficking and rights of children and women. So, welcome again to all you panelists. Thank you for being with us. And I would also like to inform the panelists that all three of them are currently worshiping at FGAKL, and they are all trained counselors. So, thank you again for availing your time. And let's get on with our first question of the day. So, the first question I'd like to direct to Dr. James Nayagam. So now, Dr. James, there have been reports on the rise of aggression and violence in home during this pandemic, and I believe we can read that in social media and all that. So I would let the audience to understand what would be considered as abuse and violation of rights. How would we define this? Or how would you define this?
Okay, we would define it as into four areas. One is neglect. Second one is emotional abuse. Third one is physical abuse, uh, and that the fourth one is sexual abuse. Generally, somewhere, sometime in our lifetime, some of us would have actually experienced it. And in my experience, there are still people who are going through some of these things with the baggage. Now, when we talk in terms of neglect, it is a situation where somebody doesn't care. They don't care whatever happens to a child, or whether the child is protected, or whether the child receives medical treatment or food, whether the child is provided with love and care. The emotional aspect of abuse is very interesting, because the word where it can have permanent psychological damage. Say, for instance, some of us actually would have had somewhere in our lifetime been rejected. So rejection is one. Using words that hurt another person is another one. So in a very contained environment in a home, when somebody gets very upset, they may use certain words. Parental conflicts, mothers and fathers using that, or even locking up a child and disciplining a child. In fact, not even showing love and concern can form some form of emotional abuse. Then we have physical abuse, which is intentionally harming a person. It can be slapping, kicking, doing something in a fit of a rage. Then we have sexual abuse. That's interesting. Huh? Sexual abuse also means you expose a child to material that can harm a child sexually. And Malaysia, of course, records that one out of every child could be a victim of sexual abuse.
Indeed, as what you have said, that with all that abuse and no goes that, but it's always a thinking that abuse only involves physical, but there's also the emotional side and a lot of other things. But interesting as well that you mentioned that neglect. So I would like to ask that if neglect of an individual is considered to be a form of an abuse, and how would that be actually considered as an abuse? Yeah, Dr. James.
Neglect,
Oh, yeah. Oh, Philona, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah,
neglect of a child is an offense under the Child Act.
yeah,
An adult, it's a bit hard to say. It's not uh, legislated and it's not specifically stated. But when neglect of a child is concerned, it is a form of abuse.
yeah. But a lot of cases that we think that neglect seems to be focusing on the children. But interestingly, there's also been reports about elderly people or adults being neglected. You know, things like this.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's not always subject to children, isn't it?
No,
That's
no.
Yeah,
basically it's about consistent failure of providing care, nurturing, um, whatever that a person needs for their esteem. Yeah, the constant need for support, attention, affection. If that is not provided, that is also a form of neglect. So
mm,
therefore, a lot of time when we talk about emotional abuse or domestic violence, it's always children or the woman, but men are also being abused. Yeah, or
yeah.
elderly adults are also being abused because they are also neglected. Yeah,
Mm.
so it's very
Yeah,
And it,
wide.
yeah.
You
yeah,
It's
know,
very wide.
it's interesting to note, especially someone who we are all human beings. We love affection, love and affection. When that is absent, you'll find that the impact on especially children, especially wives, especially elderly, feel very neglected and can have damage.
mm,
Of them. Sometimes even caregivers like you see this quite common, especially in third highest would be babysitters, child
Right.
minders. They don't care, and you find the child being neglected. Sometimes babies have come across stuffed with milk bottles just like that and gone. And so parents need to
yeah,
be aware of, especially. In fact, even looking after the elderly. Oh my goodness me! How some of the caregivers in old folks' homes.
Mm.
Mm.
Yes, that's
mm.
very true. Yeah, yeah.
So sometimes we it's a variety. It doesn't cease about age or race and all that kind of thing. So I think it's important for us to let the audience also understand that neglect is a form of an abuse, and it's not only referring to children but even adults too. Yes, before we move on to the next question, I also like to inform to our audience who are tuning in today that you yourself can participate in this talk by putting in your question forward in our comments for wherever you are logging in, whether the FGA Facebook or even the Family Life. Put on your comments and we will try to answer them if time permits. Okay. So moving on to our next question, the third questions would be, what are the signs and symptoms of someone who may be going through abuse? What are the telling signs of this? Dr. Yo Peli, would you want to take this question?
Uh, in terms of behavior, let's say if you find emotional first, if you find yourself very confused, you're wondering what's going on. Why am I so sad? Why am I just so restless? Yeah, these are really like red flag for you to ponder what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of
Mm-hmm.
course, in terms of behavior, if it's over long term, perhaps you have incidences where you want to run away from this person, or you have even run away from him, uh, and then he will come back running after you, being repentful, and then promising that I will not do that again, only to know that the cycle repeats once you go back home. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're trapped in this cycle of so-called abuse, whether it's emotionally or physically. Self-esteem, you second doubt yourself. You're wondering, whether did I make the right choice? And at times, you may even doubt God. You will even question God.
Mm.
Why are you putting me through this suffering? Yeah. So it will affect your spiritual life. Yeah, and then it affects your working life as well, your performance in the workplace. So these are
Mm-hmm.
all manifestations or symptoms of the effect of emotional trauma or distress at home.
Okay.
Yeah. These are the form of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just add something to that?
Yeah.
This is Dr. Yu has mentioned it from the perspective of the victim. Sometimes also it's for third parties, like we are aware that this is going on. Sometimes we suspect, but we don't want to really ask any questions. So it's good for us to also be aware of some of the signs that we can look out for. So we are an outsider, but a concerned third party. So, like if we see that someone we know very well is withdrawn, and if we know them well enough, we'd probably be able to see that their finances are being very controlled, their internet and social media usage is being very controlled, um, and they, well, emotionally also looking very depressed, and of course, physically, they're bruises. And belittling. Sometimes, if you are actually a third party with the couple and you see a lot of belittling going on, and the spouse who's being abused, who's the victim, just taking it and taking it. So, these are some of the signs that we can look out for as third parties. And then for us to actually find a way to tell the person, we are here for you,
See,
and
Mm.
to offer our help.
if I
Yeah.
may
Yeah.
Good
add,
point.
they
Mm.
Yes. Go
depends
ahead.
on who we are looking at. If it's a
Mm.
child, I will divide it into two: child, women, and old folks. If it's a child, there's a ways of finding out where we use various forms of therapies, play therapy, and we notice a child's behavior. We have art therapy. We notice the colors that they use, and then, of course, we observe the child's body and the child's body language. Now, if the child uses all the time black and white, there is a warning sign, a signs that say something is amiss. If a child, for instance, I came across a child who kept on burying a doll in the sand play, and I asked her, I said, "Why are you burying this? Who is that you're burying?" She said, "It's my father." And then we begin to talk more about it. Then we use a doll, for instance, and let the child talk to us and role play what
Mm.
happens in the house when when you get angry, and then they'll tell you to the pinpoint detail what abuse actually goes on. Now,
Mm.
children, of course, we look at their body, we examine them, and if there are signs where uh, there are scars and marks and so on, then we begin to probe. And then we begin to ask them, well, what's happened? What
Mm.
happened? Now, in terms of women, it depends on how close are you with them or anyone else for them to be comfortable enough to talk to you. And
Yes.
old folks, especially, they tend to be withdrawn, keep quiet until you say, "Auntie, how are you, Auntie? What's happening? Don't want to talk about it." And then slowly they begin to talk. And you see, confidentiality and all that matters a lot when it comes to these things. But closeness and awareness helps a lot.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
it's a lot of explanation that examples that you have given, and I believe that Dr. James, you are being the child advocate, you deal with a lot of children's, and of course, it's not easy for a child to come forward and especially to express. And I think what you have said is like the kind of techniques or tools that you have used, like coloring and all that, I think that that's true. For an adult, probably they will be a bit more maybe open, but I think it's also a topic of discussion today, that being silent, people who don't want to talk about it, and there must be a reason as to why they are not doing that. And I think that that's what we want to also get to our audience to understand as to why. But what you have explained, all three of you have explained, is based on your experience, right? Being trained counselors and going, you have the qualification. But let's say for me, who is a lay person, not a trained, right? So how, as a lay person, can I be a source of support to the abused? Okay, a source of a support to the abused. And this is where I'm leading to my next question, being as that, and also, is there help now? Especially, we are talking about those who are being abused, but what about the abuser themselves? Is there any help for them? Dr. Yopeli, I think you've been doing it, counseling and all that. Let's start with you.
Mm.
Yeah.
Definitely, there are help out there, but somehow it's very limited when it comes to the abuser, right? As for the victim survivor for themselves, they themselves need to recognize that they are in trouble, or there's this red flag that they have to take notice of, and they should not be living in denial, so that they can go and seek help, right? And one of the ways they seek help is to tell another person that they can trust, so that they can sort of like connect them if they don't know where to get the support that they needed. See, what James has noted about this play therapy is good, but the thing is, how do we even get the children or the person to get into therapy? So there must be this awareness, this recognition that there's this red flag and they need to get help. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
there are help out there, but I think probably we will put it in the chat.
Yeah.
But as you're saying, you say red flags and everything. So as a person, as a lay person, how can one be of a source of help? I may not be a trained counselor, but what kind of offer can I help based on the tell signs that you have shared earlier, that we can play a role? Philo, I think you have something to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, like, what I was saying earlier was, as a third party, like you're saying, you're a concerned third party. So looking out for the signs, or being aware of the signs. Of course, we don't go purposely looking for them, but,
Yes.
being aware, and you see the signs and you begin to suspect. And one very important thing is for that person to know that you are there, that you have noticed that something is wrong. And of course, as Dr. James said, like, it depends on your relationship and how close you are to that person. And we are assuming here that we have that kind of relationship with this person, whether friend, family member, or even neighbor. And therefore, we basically just make sure that we are there for them. But also, like, we've got information. We'll be putting up information about helplines that are available. Sometimes the victim is so stuck. They've been maybe abused for a very long time. Let's take domestic violence, victim of domestic violence. So sometimes they've been stuck in it for so long that really the word that I would use is they are stuck. And when we talk to them as lawyers, some of them have been in a situation for more than 20 years, and the kind of abuse is unbelievable. So they're so stuck. And so as a third party, we avail ourselves of the helplines, and we feed them with this, and we keep talking to them and saying, you need to get help, especially if the woman has got children. And so we can add that on. Look, you've got to do something because you have a responsibility to the children. And that's usually one of the things that we impress upon the ladies, the women who seek help for domestic violence. So we are ready with the information to help them, and ready to go with them if they need help. So a woman who is being abused, if it's a really serious case, call the police straight away. So we can feed them with the information, and the police actually will come and rescue. If it is an emergency situation, the police will come and rescue. So that's first line of help. And then if there's a bit of, like, it's not such an emergency, encourage the person, get medical help. Go to the hospital. In the hospitals, they've got what's called the one-stop crisis center. And the one-stop crisis center is multi-agency, police, hospital personnel, which is doctors and all of them, and even social workers. So that is a multi-agency concept which has been quite successful and it's in all government hospitals. And then the NGOs are there. So again, as a third party, be ready with the information, give it to the person, and try and follow up. Have you called them? Have you sought help? Have you sought advice? Things like that.
Yeah. Interesting. So you've mentioned that, as our panelists have mentioned, because we have resources that we want to share. And Philo, you mentioned about the one-stop crisis center. So I think this is a very helpful information, right? That we, as much as we may not be trained to help, but the very least we can do this is to guide them or give them this kind of numbers, because sometimes people who are in this situation, individuals, may not be able to have time to think of what to do, right? So I
Yes.
think from
Yes.
experience, yeah. Okay, so it's interesting that you all the panelists here are counselors, lawyers, so coming to me, if I were to give you a scenario, I am an abuse victim. Okay, I'm an abuse victim, and I come to you, to you as a counselor, to you as a lawyer, and I share my issues. So how would it be that the level of, how can I trust you to keep it confidential about the issues that I have? You know,
As
how
a
would it be as a
lawyer,
lawyer?
as a lawyer, I have
Yeah.
to keep it confidential. I mean, the wife, if let's say the woman comes with domestic abuse situation, all we can do is encourage, make a police report, seek help, do whatever is needed. We can help with the legal side of it. I mean, if they are thinking in terms of more serious steps like getting custody of the children, divorce, and things like that. But as far as whatever they're sharing with us, it's to be kept confidential. If it's child abuse, I would say this. If the woman says, my husband is abusing me and the children, so where the children are concerned, under the Child Act, it's actually, there's a duty of care to report child abuse. And that duty of care is upon whoever comes into close contact with the child. It could be a doctor in the hospital, it could be a caregiver, it could be a teacher, and a caregiver would include mother. So a mother comes to me with a situation like that, I cannot report the abuse. That's shared with me in confidence. But I can strongly encourage her that it's her duty to report, and the act makes it an offense if she doesn't report. And I could also say that, look, if you want custody of your children later, if you do not report this now, later, if it comes up in court, you could be seen as an unfit mother. So do what's needed to make sure that the thing is reported where the child is concerned or children are concerned.
Okay.
Actually,
Yeah,
I've
Dr.
come
James.
to many situations where a child comes and tells, Uncle, so and so is doing this something, and what do I do? You're really stuck because
Yeah.
that person is probably known to you. How in the
Mm,
world are we going to handle such a situation? And if it's a school, if it's some establishment, and when the child comes to you and you have to do something about it, you know,
yes.
and
Yes.
so what do we do?
Yeah, exactly. What do we do?
So, as a counselor, safety comes first. If the abuse is current and my client is very unsafe, I have a duty to report. Right? Who do I share?
Yes.
It could be first line would be the emergency contact that they put in the intake form, right? When they sign up their registration form, and then we will sit down and discuss what we should do to move forward. Yeah, most of the time, we would want them to report to the authority and to get this protection order so that they are safe.
You
Mm-hmm.
see, my
So,
challenge is when dealing especially with sexual abuse, fondling, and the child comes and says, so and so is doing this to me. That is very challenging, because at least physical abuse or whatever we can see. But if some known person like the coach or a bus driver, school bus driver, or the teacher is constantly fondling the child, that will be a challenge to prove.
but this is
Yeah.
something that is being brought to you as a counselor. If let's say you are in the place, and the child is telling you everything. So if it's a situation of life and death, does it still means that confidentiality stays for a lawyer?
No, this is where
Yeah, yeah. For a lawyer, let's say from a lawyer point of view, right? Because
Yeah.
Philo flat out say, I mean, my understanding from her conversation was that it's a flat out no, because she cannot reveal. But I don't know if it is otherwise. So go ahead, Philo.
Well, if it's a life and death situation, I would be torn because I'm also, on one hand, a counselor and on the other hand, a lawyer. And I think what I would do is actually reach out to my NGO contacts without revealing sources, without revealing or breaking confidentiality, without revealing to see how we could, like kind of move into a situation, how they could help the family move into a situation where they can get the kind of help. But the confidentiality thing is actually very, very key. But like Peli was saying, where in a counselor setting, it's different. Where it's a life and death situation, I mean, that's something that doesn't bind the counselor already. So a lawyer, um, it's a bit gray. I mean, confidentiality is very important, yes. But I would try and reach out to NGOs to see how we can cover the situation without revealing information to begin with.
Okay.
so from my
Yeah.
experience, I think this is where the earlier question about the signs. If a child refuses to go to school or doesn't want to go on the uncle bus, to fetch him or her to school, yeah, there must be something going on behind scenes. So as parents, you need to take note of it. And there's no parent who want to really expose the child to constant abuse or even molestation, right?
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
parents are more aware of it, the parents themselves will get the child to seek help. And then, that's where we can do a report and do an investigation on the uncle bus or whoever that is abusing the child. It's hard to prove, but anything that is fresh, if there's a physical redness in the vagina, that's why we need to educate the public to really go and report, and especially to the hospital to get it verified, checked.
Yes, to
That's
get
right.
it checked. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
we don't lose the evidence.
This is a good point for me too. At this juncture, I would also like to say that for institutions, um, government institutions probably have it in place. But like, let's say, for example, a church or any organization, it is important to have child protection policies, and it's important for maybe certain individuals within that. Say, for example, in the church, certain individuals to be trained to know how to even ask the right questions. Like Dr. James was saying, like someone comes and child play therapy and all that is there. But like, as an immediate thing, how do we get the child to open up? And, so it's important for us, for organizations, including churches, to have child protection policies and people trained, and there are agencies that are training, like PS the Children. They're training individuals to know how to approach children and get the right information out of them without scaring them to bits. Because children can clam up very easily. So we've got to be able to draw out the right information in order to get them the right kind of help.
Yeah, because we seems to be, I agree that, as panelists, we do a lot of probably the work with children, and I think the focus here seems to be a lot on children, but we're not forgetting the issues that the adults themselves, because during this lockdown, or even before the lockdown, it's the adults too are also people who are involved in this.
Yes.
So looking at this, I continue to remind our audience, if you have any questions at this juncture, please do put them in the comments, and we would love to tackle them. But Philo, you started with something, and I believe Dr. James, you too touched on issues. But with all that adults and the children that we are talking about, my question on what with the domestic violence or abuse and etc., are there laws in this country for these domestic violence and all that, and how do we protect the victim, right? So Dr. James, would you want to tackle this on your point of view? Yeah.
Yeah, basically, I must mention that before I come to the law part of it,
Yeah.
that abuse, child abuse, domestic violence, and so on is a byproduct of a major or another issue. It could be stress, it could be frustration staying in the house, all locked
Mm-hmm.
up at the loss of their jobs, being retrenched, daily age workers not getting enough money. And so they are all anxious. And then at the slight irritation that blows up,
Mm-hmm.
or seeing each other every day, and that stressful situation gives rise. So now I ask you, what do you address? You want to take the law and then charge the parent, and therefore the children suffer loss of parental care and the father being put into prison. You see, a lot of sensitivity has got to come in before you apply the law. Yes, we do have the Child Act. Yes, we do have the Domestic Violence Act, and even that covers old folks. But we've got to be very sensitive when you approach such situations. We've got to understand what has given rise to this situation.
So
Well,
yeah, hello.
I can agree with that to up to a point, but whatever is said and done, like, if there is an abuse situation where the woman is being abused very badly and the child is being abused very badly, we can understand the situation. I mean, okay, like one of the things that okay, let's go into what the Domestic Violence Act provides, right? So the protection, what's available under the law. So under the DV Act, the Domestic Violence Act, there are protection orders that can be obtained to protect the party that's being abused. So you have different levels of protection order. So basically, it protects the victims from further abuse. Now, what's the effect of a breach of that? Fine or imprisonment. And like the court also has the power to order compensation for pain and suffering, compensation for loss of earnings, compensation for medical whatever expenses. But this last one, the court can order rehabilitation. So at the moment, what the law seems to be providing in terms of help would be rehabilitation. So the abuser can be put into a rehab program. Now, maybe Dr. James has got more details about these rehab programs, but at least it's there, it's available. But the earlier protection mechanisms have to kick in. We can try and understand all we want of the situation, the economic situation, and all of that, but no one deserves to be abused.
I understand,
Nobody deserves.
I will tell you culturally, for women to come forward is a big challenge. Who will come and see a lawyer first? And you're dealing with all these cases. I tell you, you're getting the lady to convince to come and report also, Susa. So can you
That's-
imagine? You know, and they say, oh, no, 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 we want to protect the family, keep
yes,
quiet, why you a troublemaker,
it's
especially
true.
amongst the Indians as well.
It's
What
true. It's true, but at the same time, I think awareness of domestic violence and the effects of it and
Ah,
all of that is increasing. So
yeah.
it's sometimes also education that's needed. And third parties, we can actually help them to see that you need to get help, not just for yourself, but for your children. And so it's like the act provides for all this, and whatever is said and done, we've got to go to what the law provides. While a counselor could perhaps address all the other emotional issues and all of that, but the law has to kick in because nobody deserves to be abused. Because if you hear some of the stories of abuse, they're horrifying. Some of the stories of abuse are horrifying. So you can understand all you want. Economic situation, loss of job, honestly, you can set up a stall and sell nasi lemak, make some money, and stop abusing your wife.
Yeah, I think it has to go concurrent. The law will come in to make sure that the victims, the family is safe, and then at the same time, they have to go for therapy, to really work through, what's really going on, to address
Yes.
the root cause of the situation. Otherwise,
Yes.
even if we just punish them, put them in jail or put them in rehab center, but there's no genuine repentance or genuine change from the inside, the the cycle will just repeat when they are out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a bigger thing than just what we are seeing, being beaten or stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But
I want to
yeah, go
is
ahead, Dr. Peli.
yeah, what I want to really
Sorry.
share to the audience is to really go for counseling, look for perhaps couple counseling help first. Yeah, just this morning I had a distress call, and she was now thinking about getting out from the husband after being there for 7 years. She said she has given him multiple chance, because every time he beats, she runs, and then he says sorry, and then here she goes back, and then it just keep on repeating. And now I think she's up to her limit, and she said enough is enough. Now I have to take care of myself. I have to take care of my two kids. So it has to come to that level of awareness for them to really go and seek maybe legal help, and then now
Mm-hmm.
look for a rehab, or not rehab, a shelter, so that she can
Yes.
be safe and to be able to run from the husband. And that's
Yeah.
sad lah. To go through all this unnecessary 7 years of traumatic daily trauma.
In
Yeah.
fact,
Yeah.
Dave, that is quite true,
Yes.
because research shows before an abuse actually comes out, that person has gone through 1 year minimum of abuse and violent treatment. Whereas a sexual abuse takes 4 years before it actually comes to the notice of the authorities. Can you imagine this lady has put up 7 years of
Yeah,
being abused before it actually came? So you
that's
can
right.
imagine the accumulation and the torture these people go day in and day out,
Yes.
and they come forward. Maybe I think what we need to do is maybe have more awareness programs,
Yes.
so that
Sometimes it's lack of awareness. Yeah.
awareness programs, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is, yeah, you've got like 1 year to, even I think Philo mentioned 20 years. People who are going through all this situation, and it's truly something which is not easy. But I think one of the key thing that I take away from what Dr. Paley said earlier part is the point of raising the red flag and identifying and
Yes.
accepting that, hey, I am being abused. I
Yes.
think when the person recognizes that and
Mm.
and and actually accepts that and takes that first step, I think that's a key factor in
Yes.
trying to help forward.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are receiving questions from the floor, and so let's see whether the tech team would want to do this. But before that, just to go on the question about help for the abuser. I think, have we really addressed that? Is there really help for the abuser other than the rehab? Anything else that we can look at? Things like that. Dr. James, from your
I,
experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No.
Dealing
Yeah.
with an abusive husband is
Mm.
quite difficult. So in counseling, we are taught to focus on the victim and those around that person, because an abusive husband is nowhere generally to be helped, or the abuser. Most of the time, we deal with victims and let the abuser be dealt by the law, unless they willingly come forward to be helped.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's more that we work with the victims because of the age and so on, and
Mhm.
the abuser is dealt at a different level. But this is where an agency like uh, family uh, ministry in various groups can come in, because then they can actually manage between the relationship between child and parents and bring them together. So
Family counseling.
family counseling, that helps.
Yeah.
If the willingness to intention to heal the relationship, that is very important. Otherwise, mainly the victim lah.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of help that we need. There's a lot of help and resources that we can actually share with our audience. And I think the audience, all of you, if you're watching, you can also look into the chat and the comment section. There will be resources being shared by the team. And I think you can also visit it later on in order for you to get what are the places that we can get help from, especially if we know someone who's in that situation. Okay, so we
But
would
Dave,
like to, yeah,
I
okay,
must make
sorry, Dr. James.
one comment. Being
Yeah.
living in an urban situation, we
Mm.
have what you call social isolation. That means
Okay.
neighbors don't want to get campur tangan with their next neighbor. So
Mm.
in the urban setting, there are lots of abuse, and we can hear why is it that it takes years to go on? Because we as neighbors don't want to interfere, and this happens in the urban setting, and so
Yeah.
we call it social isolation, and that's the reason perhaps why 7 years goes on, because people are not taking upon themselves to report the matter. I think we should, as neighbors, as members of community, and so on, take that issue, take that initiative to report. You don't have to mention your name. You don't
Yeah.
have to mention anything about yourself.
Yeah.
Especially with child abuse. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
True.
there's also law in the country that if you are found not reporting,
Yes.
you are also, committing a crime of
Mm.
omission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That actually doesn't apply to neighbors. It applies to all those people who are in very close contact with the child. But it's more a social and moral responsibility that we need to impress upon society. That, if you hear a child crying and being whacked mercilessly, we can hear the cane. Yeah. So we have to do that. We have to take it upon ourselves. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I think in times of things like this, as you say, social isolation, right? But there's also the thing about kepochi. I want to know, but I don't do anything about it. Things like this. So that's another
We have to
danger
be
part.
concerned kepochis and we
Yes.
must get
Yeah.
involved.
Concern kepochis. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to add
Yeah.
one more point. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just one
Yeah.
more point. Earlier, I was talking about, all the ways in which we can support. One of the things that we can help a person with is to come up with a safety plan. And a safety plan is like putting things together, phone numbers, your documents. I mean, I'm talking about very serious abuse case and where the person actually is in fear of life and needs to escape maybe very
Mhm.
suddenly and very urgently. So helping the person to actually put together a safety plan or encouraging the person to look for it. Some of these helplines that we've given y'all, they've got lots of information about that in their
Mm.
websites.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So this
Yeah.
based on order. First
Yeah.
is to identify your own red flag,
Mm.
and then
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
need to, look for a safe place. Should the
Mm.
Yes.
abuse happen in your house, you must be able to identify a safe place where it's easy for you
Mhm.
to exit. Yeah, and
Mm.
then this
Okay.
place should not contain like knives or any of those
Yes.
weapons that can be used against you. Most
Yes.
likely it's the bedroom. So make sure
Mhm.
you have this very secure lock, but yet at the same time child friendly. In case you need to
Mm.
get your children to run to the room, right? Always tell
Mhm.
the children not to interfere because the
Mm.
abuser can grab hold of the children and then use it as a weapon as well, right, against you. Yeah. So make sure
So.
you have a safe place, and then you know what? During good time, so-called good time, you need to,
Mhm.
as Philo say, have this safety plan. Make sure you have this emergency bag where you can grab and run, like your passport, your birth certificate, everything. Hide
Yeah.
it somewhere. Even a more second mobile phone, hide it somewhere safe so that you can really access it and then call. Um, the other thing that came out during MCO is they have
Mhm.
this code, secret code.
Yeah.
Yeah, once if your neighbor sees that, or you show that sign to your children, that's where
Yeah.
the children will know to call the police or to call for help. And that code
Mm.
is it's just like the thumb, and then it's like a shape of a fist,
Mhm.
right? So it's like a track. So when you show this sign to the children or to the neighbor, if at all somebody is jogging and you're at the veranda, when they see this
Yeah.
sign, they should know what to do. So this is like the
Okay.
community awareness, or something that's common. So there's this secret code that we can actually educate,
Yeah.
or you can among your own family member have
Yes.
this
Yeah.
secret code. Mm.
That's
Okay,
good.
thank you, Dr.
That's
Paley.
very
I
good.
think those are information that are very helpful, and I'm sure we will share them as well in the chat group and where they can probably obtain this information. So at this
Yeah.
juncture, I would like to take up a question from the floor, from the FB. So we'll just get the tech team to display it. And the question is from Naomi Nat. And her question is that, is mom or dad disciplining a teenager who is very rude? daughter uses vulgar language to parent is considered that as an abuse. And or if you say the mom and dad is to slap the daughter and the whole event turns into a fight, is this considered an abuse? So I think this is where I think it's also a point of tackling if it's a domestic issue where a teenager is being rude and there's vulgar language being used and there's slapping, physical, and the whole event turns into a fight. Do you consider this to be an abuse? So it comes back to that definition that we had earlier.
Okay,
How
can
do
I?
you tackle this question? Yes, go ahead, Dr. Peli.
I will answer from a different perspective. Yeah,
Okay.
why would the child being rude to the parents? I think the child must also have been triggered by the parents. So therefore, they get into this vicious cycle. And when the child is triggered, and that's where the child become louder, and then the parents will say that you are rude, and then the parents will slap the child, and then the child gets even louder just for the sake of self-defense. Yeah, and that's where the cycle repeats. So I think both party has to take responsibility. Yeah, whether it's an abuse or not an abuse, it depends on how frequent this situation is. Is it a one-off thing or is it a constant thing? Yeah, the family definitely need to learn how to communicate or how to do conflict in a healthy way.
Yeah,
Okay.
agreed.
So we need to understand whether this is a continuous thing or it's just a one-off thing.
Yes.
That also defines it whether it's considered to be an abuse or
Yes.
not.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, do we have a second question in terms of from the FB on this? No. Okay. All right. We do have. All right. Julie is from Julie Kwa. Thank you, Julie, for putting up this question. And what if the family won't report because the abuser is 80 years old, head of the family, and he has threatened revenge and has actually revenged any reports of his beating of his wife or adult 40-something children. So the children are about 40. And after a release from any facility, the abuser is released back to the family. So what if the family won't report because it's an elderly person?
Well, it is
Physically aged.
actually, at the end of the day, it is actually up to the family. I mean, like, we're talking about a domestic violence situation where it they are the ones, unless it's child abuse, and then, a neighbor calls the police. I mean, domestic violence also, I know the neighbors have called the police because sometimes it's just so disturbing. And so neighbors call the police. Police may come. But, in Malaysia, for the longest of time, I mean, now with the Domestic Violence Act has been tightened, and there are more provisions, and it's actually pretty good. Only thing is enforcement could be an issue. But the police, for the longest of time, very often just treated domestic situations as, ayah, ini keluarga punya problems saja, so they just take it as that, and they don't really want to interfere, even between husbands and wives. Now they're being forced to or pushed into taking more action. So, but at the end of the day also, it's up to this family. The family has to decide, we have to take action, we've got to make some reports. See, because if they don't report, who's going to report? If they want to come out of the situation, they've got to report. Make a police report, go to JKM or whatever it is. If there's abuse, if it can come under the definition of abuse, let's say under the Domestic Violence Act, so get to the proper authorities and see whether some action can be taken.
Yeah. Okay.
This scenario is very classic, in our culture where we don't want to air dirty linen in public. Yeah. So what we do is really to empower the family member that's around them to make sure that they know how to draw boundaries to protect themselves and not, let their words or get them to harm them or physically harm them, their words abuse them.
Yeah.
But Dave, I would seriously think an opportunity like family life is the best place for me to come and talk because I'm comfortable. And if we can use that and promote such services, that will help a lot of victims to be able to come in an environment of where you have such trained persons to be able to be the first platform to be able to talk.
Yeah.
And if we can promote things like family life and all other such services, that would greatly help a lot and lots of people.
Yeah.
And I
And I
would
think
get very get intimidated if I were to talk about the police or the lawyers. But if you have an agency like Family Life and all this and promote that, or anyone else will feel very comfortable coming and talking about the situation.
Mm. And Dr. James, as we said that this is also part of a talk that's being organized by Family Life with FGA, and I think that's also important for us to understand to our audience, those are tuning in of Family Life. We do offer counseling. We have counselors, trained counselors, not anybody that you pick from the street, but trained counselors, and follow up with the numbers that will be displayed in the chat, and you may also follow up with the the FGA website to obtain the numbers for Family Life if you need any help on such thing. And I think it's amazing. But I just want to ask probably a last question, probably the question number 8. Just question. The last question is: are the laws adequate? Do we consider that the laws being adequate for the victims of abuse at
The
this moment?
laws, the laws, I would say, there's always room for improvement, right?
Mhm.
Like I said earlier, I think one of the weaknesses would be enforcement. What I mean is the laws have got a lot of provisions, a lot more help, because over the past few years, with a lot of amendments to the Domestic Violence Act, with the Child Act, and then the Sexual Offences Against Children Act having come into force in 2017, after several very key cases like Richard Huckle. So there are lots of there's lots of help out there.
Mm.
Adequacy, maybe it's in enforcement, and perhaps more sentencing powers needed. But apart from that, it's pretty comprehensive. Actually, our Domestic Violence Act, the amendment to it, then the Child Act, the Sexual Offences Against Children's Act. The Child Act was amended to include the pedophile registry and heavier penalties a few years ago, I think 2016. So it's they're moving with the flow, like the need, the urgency,
Okay.
and they're moving with it. So that's good. It's there. We just have
Mm.
to make sure that enforcement and
Well,
stuff.
Dave,
laws are there, and I think, of course, the issue is always about enforcement. So I want to take. I think that there's a question from the floor as well. So let's take that, and this be our question is from Sarah Cheng. So how to change the mindset of women who come from a patriarchal society to report abuse? And this is the women especially. They usually cover up because of shame. So this is muka, jaga muka.
Yeah.
So how?
Mm.
okay, Dave, I must add this. That is a very good question, because women come, and the first thing that we need to do is to provide and surround her with some form of support, to
Mm.
tell her that she's cared for, that she's protected, and that begins to open up for her to be able to share much more deeper. I think the support is very important, that we surround her, whether it's a lady or if it's a child, and
Yeah.
then from there we have to assure her and then progress from that on, how best we're going to deal with that situation at a community level, or at a team taking that up and where it leads. What do you think are the rest of my two dear friends there?
Yeah.
Philo?
Um,
I think
I would say,
yeah, we might
sorry.
be running. I think we might be running out of time. So Philo, if you can just make it quick, then
Okay, I'll make
take
it
it
very
up.
quick. People love stories. So,
Mm.
a woman who is having that problem issue with shame, mindset issue, I would say go to some of these websites. We're giving you the links.
Yeah.
WCC, WAO, they've got
Mm.
stories of women who've made the break, who have
Mm.
the success stories. So, read
Mm.
those stories and encourage these women to see that that's available for them as well. They
Yeah.
do not have to hide in shame.
Yeah.
That's right. They don't have to suffer alone. Go for therapy, because in
Mm.
therapy we specifically teach you how to reframe your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
if you are a child of God, God promised, for you a good life abundantly, and you have to assess yourself. Are you in that space? Yeah, because the enemy has come to kill, steal, and destroy. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
perhaps you really have to pray and seek the Lord and ask for
Mm.
discernment. Is this
Mm.
the am I in the right space right now? Yeah. Again, claim God's promises like Psalm 32 verse 8.
Yeah.
Let's choose God, because He will instruct you and He will guide you in the way you should go.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you for that word. I think that is very important to encourage our viewers as well. And thank you to our panelists. So before that, I think it's important for us that our audience take away that this kind of issues are not something that's going to disappear immediately. It's been ongoing, but what can we do in order for us to is to be aware of issues like this? Where can we get help from? How can we
Yes.
help others? So
Yes.
all these resources, we want our audience to know that these will be available on the chat. So you can always, if you missed it earlier, you can always get it from the chat group that will be on the FGA Facebook as well as the Family Life. And I hope that this information shared it's useful that you find. And we will be back. Family Life Hard Talk will be back. Family Hard Talk will be back in 2 weeks, bringing you another topic on building missional families. So we just want to also remind that if you have any suggestions on topics that you would like family or FGA to bring up on these kind of talks, please put them in the chat group as well. And we would appreciate any suggestions from you. And if you have missed any questions or you have any questions, don't be shy. Continue to put them, and we will address them along with our panelists and others to do this. So with that, I want to thank our fellow panelists, Dr. James, Dr. Yo Pei Lee, Philomena, and all you audience, on behalf of Family Life and FGA. We hope you've benefited from all of this. And my parting word is stay safe, stay healthy. Goodbye, everyone. God bless. Bye-bye.